Okay, so before I think I toss out some ideas and questions for us as a panel to discuss, I wanted to actually open it a little bit more. Are there questions from earlier that people, had held on to or wanted answered by other people currently on the panel? If so, please raise your hand, and now is the time. Yes, gentleman here.
Jerry was talking about sharing the source, right? And I was wondering under what license terms like he does that, and just general understanding of sharing the
Right. Our policy is to allow users to, it's kind of like a CC BY license, right? So anyone can use it. You can certainly, if you make any changes to it, you need to, share those changes back with us. I can tell you we haven't had any, since we've launched the thesaurus, we've not had any other users take it and use it. So although the license terms are out there, we haven't experienced any use cases of that. But you'll see if you go to www.ieee.org and just on the main search type IEEE thesaurus, you'll see our whole thesaurus policy management page, and you can get a lot more detail there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think we had another over here.
I'd have to say we're still in too much beta at USA Today to have any of those metrics yet. But in other installations, yes, we could see 20 to 30% increase in some of those KPIs, even just for small things like. In those the topic pages, which also become more visible to Google, that's that incremental traffic.
That question's a little bit difficult for me to answer. I don't know. I can tell you though that when we introduced the guided navigation off of our search results page with the facets, and granted those facets are generated from metadata, they could be generated from machine-aided processes as well. Our page views went way up. I mean, and it seemed that also a user stickiness time went up. But it's hard to attribute that to one thing. Because when we roll out features, we roll out multiple features, and you don't know whether or not the increased use is due to the fact that, I don't know, is it finals period and people are using more of our content? Are our salespeople reaching broader markets in India and China? Is that due to it? So there are a lot of factors that I think go into measuring usage, and it's difficult to make that make a singular case. For the semantic tagging stuff.
I'll also kind of speak a little bit to that from Silverchair's perspective. We are, currently rolling out a new kind of combined semantic and analytics package, but we have seen some promising early returns based on traffic going to content that is suggested through semantic relationships. In one case, we're seeing kind of double the amount of usage, and so we're hoping to continue our analysis and see where we can drive that even higher for each partner that we're working with. I think there was yes.
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. So the question is the tagging from users, right? How do you leverage the tagging from users? Yeah, sometimes we refer to this as crowdsourced tagging as well. It's interesting. It needs to be guided somehow, because I mean, if you ask any free tags, then it's pretty hard to connect those tags to the taxonomy. So I mean that's something which is I think to be taken into account. So, but it's great because the system can learn from those tags suggested by the users. So it could be part of the process. Yeah, I mean the tags generated by the machine itself, by the software. Number one, the tags validated or generated by the editorial team. Number two, and then the third pillar would be those tags generated directly by the users. In some cases, I think it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and I think it makes even more sense if you're able to leverage these to teach the engine to be better at tagging itself.
I'll take a shot at that too. We've thought about that at the IEEE, and we think that I think it does hold some promise. But the big challenge is getting enough a high enough percentage of users to actually do that for you. And I think we find that at least on our site, people are pretty selfish. They come in, they get what they want, they leave. I don't mean to sound cynical about this, but I'm not sure that there's incentive enough for folks to tag this, even if we give them guidance for that. Perhaps doing a contest and say every 1,000th person who adds tags has a chance to win an iPod or an iPad, but we haven't gotten there yet.
Well, and actually, a great way to do it is a gamification and giving people prominence. If they've tagged a lot of content and it's well tagged, people love, being recognized, even for nothing. Badges, it's you see it throughout social media and other commenting things. If people comment a lot and they become experts, there are easy ways of giving recognition that actually will drive a lot of this behavior.
That's a new term, gamification. Is that in the
That's in my
taxonomy?
It is an emerging field. Great. I think I saw some more questions. Yes.
I didn't have the question.
The question was, the question was, if you don't have a taxonomy and your assets are primarily non-text, such as images, audio clips, videos, are there ways that we recommend or could, any advice to offer on how to generate a taxonomy based on the assets that are available?
Well, I think for the videos would be easier. Typically, the videos have some audio behind them that you could you could grab the text and the audio and feed that into the engine. As far as the images go, one method you might use is finding if the image is surrounded by text, is just grabbing X number of words before and after that image to just hopefully that image is within context of the text that it's in the middle of. That's probably the only two ways that I know of, but there could be others.
Well, we have to remember that for many, many, many years we didn't have text crunching, so people did it by hand, right? They knew what the content was about. They read the content items and they did it by hand. The speech to text, though, for audio is a very viable possibility to generate some text that you can use. Facial recognition and Google Goggle type analysis of images is also remarkably accurate. It's going to see the Eiffel Tower. There are things that it can see. So there are ways to maybe pull some of the stuff out of the images to start with. But it's not like, really, librarians have been doing it for thousands of years. So some collections, are just harder than others to do the taxonomy. But good old-fashioned brain power still works.
Right. And I would reiterate that, if there is any metadata available, I know you were speaking to, what happens when there's not text, but, if you have any information about even the format of the files, or their provenance, or even of a title or author. You can start pulling stuff out of that. I think also one challenge, if you don't have text assets, it can also be difficult to. There's some work obviously to develop just a vocabulary of what these assets are describing, but then to put them together to find the relationships between the concepts when you don't have kind of a lot of linguistic information available, especially when we're looking at images and not, kind of video where we could get transcriptions. I think that would be, I don't have an easy solution for that. I think that's a lot of, manual work, or seeing if you can get some topic mapping engines once you've pulled out key concepts that are represented.
I'm wondering if companies like Corbis, how they approach this, or some of the other photo stock houses. I'm sure they begin with a manual, analysis of that image, and then a person writing a description of it, and then using that description to feed an engine. But it would be interesting to perhaps get a hold of somebody at Corbis.
Getty has phenomenal. Okay.
Yeah. So I think that's one place to look.
Yeah, maybe I can comment a little bit on how Getty does it, because we work with the AFP, Agence France Presse, in France, and they have a lot of. If you look at a website called Image Forum, which is great, by the way, because they have a lot of pictures on news. You see some tags, and the tags are coming from the captions of the picture itself. So the photograph from AFP was in Syria or in New York or anywhere, is supposed to send the picture with some tags or some caption, and then the software analyzes this part. But you need to rely on some sort of descriptor narrative related to the picture itself.
Any other questions from the audience? Okay. With that, I think we have about 20 more minutes for our discussion. And I was hoping, Kathleen, if you wouldn't mind opening with kind of a little bit of a further high-level discussion about kind of semantic web versus, some of the within enterprise, not necessarily SEO, if you feel comfortable doing that. Just because I think this audience may not be as potentially, I don't know, as keyed into what is meant by semantic web technologies.
Well, let's start with, did anybody know already what I was talking about when I said, when I talk about semantic web or semantic markup? Is that, yeah, there we go. I'm not prepared to.
Put you on the spot a little bit, sorry.
What I was trying to delineate, though, is the difference between what we're doing with semantic text processing to derive these tags versus how we then structure the data in a database and how we hold that data to then repurpose it. So moving from an SQL-based database structure to an RDF database and that which is considered a semantic representation. That was, when we were talking about this earlier, that was really what I was trying to get out there for everybody. So there's a question.
Well, it actually, I'm not sure I'll be able to frame this intelligently, so in general, you hear a lot about linked open data, and this whole notion of putting some version of your data or your content out in some sort of RDF store, in the linked open data, for my ecosystem. But then the next sort of step of actually both not just making your data available, but using the wealth of data that's out in, I see things like the New York Times has done and other organizations, probably yours as well, with that massive data that are really cool, and I'd like to figure out how to do things like that, but it just seems like a very daunting prospect. Are there any sort of tools or best practices that you're aware of for actually using that data, that once you're making your own data available in this linked open data world, using the wealth of data that's out there to build users?
Noel, I do think it's daunting. And, there are so many standards. There are so many tools. The BBC spoke this morning and someone asked them, so what tool sets do you use? He rattled off 12 different, it's really, it's crazy. You have to start with what are you trying to accomplish? Because it's too vast. Making your data available, obviously in an API, and maybe making a subset of it available. From the news perspective, we aren't looking so much to make it to be linked open data, to be that sort of freely available, but what the value of that structure does, because the Googles of the world have, while they won't say it explicitly, this is how they do things now, right? They base everything on semantics. There are something like 216 ranking factors that Google uses, although they don't say that again. But the better your data is structured for a machine to read, the better it's going to be found. That doesn't answer your question specifically.
Now that's in the realm of schema.org.
Right. Yes, that's part of it.
That's more like almost, I'm probably misusing the word, like micro formats or something.
Yes. Yet again, another standard, right? So that nobody can even agree on what that markup is going to be. But for my consumption of linked open data, the value to me is that. So I have these 91,000 person records or these geographies. Well, I need updates to that stuff, right? I really can't manage every time someone gets married or dies or has a baby, all that stuff, right? So I need data sources for that. And there are all these wonderful things like DBpedia, like Freebase, where I can pull that data. It's been made available as in this RDF format in these APIs. I can pull that down and populate my database then to repurpose.
Ask one last question. You had an interesting slide up there where you sort of compared taxonomy versus ontology. Ontology is kind of many-dimensional, system that kind of embodies all of the important attributes of the term or something like that. I'm not probably expressing that exactly the way you. I'm just curious what you're using, what sort of tools you're using to manage, that sort of ontological.
So the vendor's name is Mondeca. It is an RDF. It can input OWL and export OWL or other SCOS formats. It is a full data modeling, similar, to I'm sure people are probably aware of Protege or other top rate, other tools that allow you to create that three-dimensional picture. Well, it was all decided before I got there, but yes, it was specifically a lot of text mining engines have a taxonomy management component to them, but they're not nearly so robust, and that 360, that ontological view, it's really more a straight hierarchy. We were looking to, and didn't support RDF, having the data then in an RDF format, didn't support the extensibility of what we were looking to do. So that the two software packages, they work together. They already had a relationship, but yeah, that was the decision there.
Oh no, that was an excellent part of the discussion. We want this to be open. Are there any other immediate questions from the audience? Okay, I was wondering if, and I'm happy to talk about a little this as well. We've, I think, all mentioned in some of the talks a little bit about what went into, for those, using a taxonomy. Once you've decided to go that route, what went into it. But I was wondering if maybe we could provide some recommendations for those people who are looking to develop your controlled vocabulary or taxonomy. What are some good starting points? Both looking at what's available within the organization, and I know Kathleen, you mentioned licensing some things. Do you have any sort of best practices or lessons learned from your experience, that you would give someone kind of starting out?
Well, as I think as I mentioned, I would take a large dump of data, and in this case, I'm lucky to have text to start with, which in the news world is going to the video and the photos are basically going to follow the same taxonomy. So take a statistically relevant amount of content across a given property or across the entire corpus, and run it through. In this case, I can run it through Temis. There are other text analytics packages, or if you have another vendor that you're using, you can do it with them. But to just start with extracting those noun phrases or parsing those sentences so that I get what are the entities. As Guillaume mentioned, you don't have to have a taxonomy. The system, the software is actually recognizing a lot of this stuff. So that's the first pass. And then you just start whittling it down. So you come up with what you feel is appropriate for your products, for what you're going to do with the taxonomy. Yes.
Could I ask another question? Sorry, because one thing that both resonated with me, but that I didn't see how it's practical, was your statement that you shouldn't have task forces, or committees, or essentially you should keep anybody who's overly emotional about this issue out of the picture. The kinds of things we're trying to build are full of technical language that if we do the extraction ourselves, people who aren't subject matter experts are not necessarily going to understand it.
Oh, absolutely.
And so I'd be interested in your comment on that. Also, just as a separate, as a side note, or as a side question, since you talked about using Temis' system, did you, before you use their clustering functions to try and get at sort of meaningful taxonomy?
Yes. Okay. So to the first point, when I say no committees and no group think, I don't mean for the entire process. And subject matter experts are absolutely vital to everything. But I think you're best off trying to start with a framework, trying to do taking a first pass guess, and even if that's just extracting the noun phrases and then going to the SMEs and saying, okay, look. But I've had taxonomy consultants who say, well, we're going to sit down for 5 hours with the SMEs and we're going to ask them what they do, and then that's what the taxonomy is going to be. And so, and in other cases, they're going to convene a big group of people and they're going to meet every week and they're going to talk about. So that's fine, but I think if you start with some sort of framework, you're going to get there faster. So that was really when I refer to the benevolent dictatorship. It's you are getting input, just in different parts of the process. I did not use Temis's clustering. The taxonomy was developed actually before I joined Gannett, and it was licensed from the AP. So have used the process with other vendors, and that's where that kind of commenting comes from.
Yeah, Stuart, we at IEEE we actually we have two classically trained librarians on staff who worked with the software vendor to vet through the building of the rules files and the extraction of the thesaurus terms, and then that was a small group. So we had those two people and maybe a couple of other people who are more seasoned editorial folks within the IEEE. And once we had the first draft, if you will, of the thesaurus, it was then rolled out to those 11 expert EE people who gave feedback. So the 9-month process that I described included all of that, and all of those passes.
How many of those are taxonomy, meaning the sort of
Right. I believe we have about, I could get you the exact numbers, but I think there are about probably close to 1,000 in the IEEE thesaurus that we determine, that we classify as taxonomy terms. And those are, very high-level terms.
But then the rest of the thesaurus is presumably synonyms for
Right.
meaningful
Right.
terms.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. Did we want to get back to, I think we've got about 5 more minutes here. I just wanted to also kind of reiterate some of the kind of lessons learned or best practices, at Silverchair, where we also do taxonomy development as part of implementation projects. And I would also like to say that, it's also been in our experience that we do kind of this bottom-up and top-down approach, where you start with canvassing the materials you have. At the bottom up, you've got your text, or most publishing societies have a lot of text, or they have a lot of assets with metadata, or transcripts of videos, or your letters and blogs, and sort of that's one really rich resource. And obviously, if you have structured data, that helps even more, because you can start learning. You might find noun phrases that are more relevant coming from your author keywords fields or your titles, and be able to use that with a clustering. You've also many organizations, they may not realize it, but, if they've got an existing site or sort of an internal enterprise system, you might already have some sort of grouping or hierarchical structure, your special interest groups that can start forming an idea of, what your topics might be. And so if you can simultaneously kind of come up with a framework and start identifying major concepts that are coming from your content to start feeding into that framework, that's when you can bring in, your subject matter experts, joined with your knowledge organization experts like your taxonomists and librarians, and start piecing that together to build, terminology sets, more than one, or, maybe one really big one that can help feed the systems and the purposes that you need it to use for.
That brings up I'm sorry. That brings up an interesting issue.
Sure.
Which is that it seems like from querying the data, and that one thing that an organization might use a controlled vocabulary or has to do with maybe how manuscripts are assigned within a department, among different editors. But it seems like in some ways the bottom-up approach, totally content-driven, might come up with something that would be great for end users, but not good for that internal purpose. Do you run into situations where you have, multiple taxonomies, covering the same general area but in different ways?
Well, I think to speak, from my experience, yes, yes, you can end up with, depending on, say you're an organization which has wants to develop a unified or master taxonomy, which will eventually be used to, power maybe your .org site if you have like patient or public-facing sites, and also wants to classify all of your internal, meeting notes, minutes, anything that may not be kind of used for the same, for the same audience. And so I think, yes, there are different ways you can map concepts together or create different views of a taxonomy or classification to serve different purposes. You might have different labels for things that are for patients only or for the public only. You might be lifting only certain aspects, but you can recognize that there are certain ways you might label things which mean the same thing, but you want to present them differently, and you might have different hierarchies and different ordering principles. And I think that's really important when you're first embarking on a project to understand that possibility. And I don't know if Jerry, you guys are already using, I think, multiple.
Right, and we find, I think we're finding that a bit confusing and want to get to one eventually.
Right.
It'll blend the two, and it's a negotiation with InSpec as to how much we can use of their taxonomy. So, but we'd like to eventually just have one.
Right. All right, I think we have time for about one last question if anyone's got it. Otherwise, I will release everyone a couple of minutes early.
All right, teacher.
All right.
That brings some applause.
I know. Thank you so much for joining us on Tag Me Maybe. I think, I'm not sure.